Hey everyone, today I'm taking a look at the GIPF project, and I'm going to be talking about the 7 abstract strategy games in order from my least favourite up to my most favourite, sharing thoughts as I go. Now, if you're not aware with what the GIPF project is, it is a series of abstract strategy board games that come with these lovely components, all designed by the same designer, Chris Berm, and the time frame in which these games were released was quite wide because they started in the mid-90s and the most recent one came out in kind of the 2017, I believe, so definitely a wide time frame, and I believe there are even more to come. Now, before I get started on my thoughts on these 7 games, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer, and if you use the link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. Okay, so I'm going to start with Zerts, which was number 3 of the series, and I should say all of these games are 2-player only abstract strategy games. Zerts is certainly a unique game. I can't think of anything else it would compare to, and it definitely feels weird and unlike any other game that I've played or any other game in the series. So this one is a game where you're trying to collect marbles. And these marbles don't come, or they're not assigned to a particular player. So you have 3 different types, black ones, the grey ones, and the white ones. And they come in different kind of rarities. So the black ones are much more common than the white ones. And what you're trying to do is you are trying to collect, I believe, 6 black ones, 5 grey ones, or 4 white ones. Or you can collect 3 of each. And that's your kind of 2 different winning conditions, or 4 different winning conditions, if you want to put it that way. Now, the game flow is pretty simple, where you have one of 2 options. The first option, which is what you'll be doing most of the time, is by placing a marble onto the board, which is made up of all these separate little discs. You can put that marble anywhere, but as soon as you do, you have to remove one of these discs. So the board is constantly getting smaller and smaller as the game progresses. Now, the second option is a mandatory option as long as that particular scenario is in play, which is if you have a situation where a marble is directly next to another marble, like here, then you have to jump over that existing marble, or at least make one of those moves if you can. So in this example, this white marble can jump over this kind of mottled marble and land here. When you jump over a marble, you'll collect it and put it in your scoring pile, but you can take more actions and string more collections together if you do that. So for example, this one could jump over this one here, then this one could jump over the one that just landed there. So as you can see, you can chain these actions together. Now, the feeling of this game is so strange because I think initially the strategy is quite opaque. You're not quite sure on how you should be playing, and it just seems to work out. But the more I've played this, the more I've started to understand the nuances and where the strategy really is. And it's all about trying to force your opponent to make moves that you're willing to make them, or to let them have, because there's no way of getting around, allowing your opponents to have marbles. One way or another, they are going to get them, but you're just trying to prevent them from getting the marbles that they exactly want, and making them make moves where you can take marbles that you want. So you definitely do have to think maybe 2-3 turns ahead at all times here, and it does become a bit of a brain burner as you see the potential moves unravel and start to see that kind of cascading chain reaction thing coming into play. So this one, I think it has potential to climb. I think it's sitting at the bottom at the moment because, again, that strategy is a little bit more opaque. The first half of the game feels like you are somewhat going through the motions, and the game does come alive during that second half, or particularly that last quarter of the game when you know what your opponent wants. And moving those particular discs becomes much more important because you can deny your opponent making certain moves. And there is a slightly different way you can collect the marbles, where if you have a kind of a stray piece kind of on the extremity of the board and you slide one of these discs out and that piece is kind of stranded on an island, you also get that marble. So just another thing you need to be wary of. Now this game, although I put it at the bottom, I do still like it, and it definitely has piqued my interest, maybe even more than some of these other games, because I feel like I've got so much more to discover with Zerts. But as for now, because I'm still yet to really sink my teeth into the game and see where that gameplay is, I put Zerts at 7th place. At number 6, I have Punkt, which is game number 5 of the series. Much like Xerts, this is kind of the outlier of the group. It feels a bit less of an abstract strategy game than some of the others. This one, you are trying to connect your pieces, so you have a kind of a black player and a white player, from one edge of this hex board to the other in a kind of an unbroken chain. So you have these kind of weird looking pieces where you have these little triangles, these kind of straight ones, these slightly crooked ones. And if you look carefully, each of these pieces has a kind of a highlighted spot on it, which is called the punkt of the piece. And that is a very, very strong part of the game, is where you place those punkt pieces. Because you have, I think it's basically two actions or two options you can take. Number one is if you want to place a new piece onto the board, then you can just do that. It has to be on ground level though, so you're going to have to put it flush with the actual board itself. But from that point, those pieces can actually move by sliding along these kind of axes where the board sits. But you are using that punkt piece, that particular spot, as the pivot point. So you can kind of pivot them, you can slide them up and down or along these axes, and you can even end up putting on top of your own pieces or overlapping your opponent pieces, which is a very important part of the game, by trying to break those chains and break those patterns of your opponent. But everything needs to be kind of sitting flush, and you need to have that punkt piece over one of your own pieces. The rest of it can cover over your opponent's, but that one piece has to go over your exact own piece. So you can very carefully plan things out here. Now, a bit like Xerts, this one, I think the first half of the game feels like you are just kind of swimming through treacle. You're not really knowing what you're doing, hoping things work out in the long term. But as you come closer and closer to, completing that chain and winning the game, that's when you want to start really interacting with your opponent, thinking ahead, knowing what to place pieces down to act as a kind of a base to put future pieces to block them off and cut things off and so on. So I think the actual tension does start to amp up as the game develops. Again, it does feel a bit nebulous. It feels a little bit weird and kind of esoteric. But I do like that very clean winning condition of getting from one side of the board to the other. There is normally a moment in the game where that penny drops, where you think, you know what, I've made mistakes. I didn't see it coming, and I cannot kind of make up ground on my opponent now. They're going to win, and there's not much I can do about it. But the game is kind of quick enough. You're only looking at around 20 to 30 minutes to play this one. I suppose if you've got two really good players who are equally skilled, it can go on longer than that. But I do like the quirkiness of it, and I like how different it feels. Again, maybe it feels a little bit more clunky, as maybe a lot of people would like their abstract strategy games to feel. And I can see people bouncing off this one. I think some people are going to really like it. Some people are not going to like it at all, and they might even see it as not really fitting the rest of the series too well. But I personally enjoy it. Again, it's not my favourite. It has come in at number 6, but I can see its merit. So that is Punkt at number 6. At number 5, I have GIPF, which is, of course, the namesake of the series, and therefore number 1 of the series. Now, for me, this one feels like a more traditional abstract strategy game. It feels like something that's been around for hundreds of years, really. So this one, you are simply trying to create 4 of a row in your particular colour. So you have the black player and the white player. Gameplay wise, very straightforward. You're just placing one of your pieces on one of these outer spots and then sliding in, and everything is going to kind of chain reaction as you push these pieces onto the board and shifting them across, creating kind of cross hatches and so on. So for example, if I put one here, I would slide it in, and therefore this one will move here, this one will move here, and so on. And as you can imagine, as the board starts to populate with game pieces, creating 4 in a row is somewhat inevitable. Now, the winning condition in this game is kind of one of the most interesting things about it, because it makes the game feel more like a game of attrition, because the game will actually end when one player can no longer take a turn. So it's not about kind of capturing a certain number of opponents' pieces, although that is very important. It's all about kind of, keeping yourself in the game as long as you can. So as soon as you create a kind of 4 in a row of yours, or of course your opponent's pieces, that player is going to take all of their pieces back into the supply, ready to be deployed again. But the twist is that any of the opponent's pieces that are in that particular line will be removed from the game permanently. Therefore, they have fewer pieces to play with. Of course, that means they're going to more likely run out of actions to take. So sometimes you have to start playing a bit more cautiously as your opponents or your pieces start to bleed out of the game. That's pretty much what the game entails. Again, a lot more straightforward. I think this one has a bit more of a slower feel to it. I think it does kind of drag its heels a little bit more. It feels a little bit more plodding than some of the other games, but I think a lot of players will actually like that because it does feel more familiar to those kind of abstract strategy games that we're more familiar with. So I'd like this one. I can't really criticize the gameplay because it works exactly as it should, but I can imagine some people feeling this one's a little bit more boring than some of the others. Now, I don't feel that way, but it's definitely not as exciting or in your face as some of the other ones, and that potential to make those big moves doesn't quite come through as much. But saying that, you do have to be kind of hyper alert in not allowing your opponent to make an obvious move that you didn't see, because a particular shift in the tokens can completely throw the game on its head. So again, another game you have to be very cautious of what your opponent can do at all times, and that kind of comboing and how things shift is very interesting, and how those tiles move. So again, this one, I don't really have anything objectively bad to say about it, and I do enjoy it, but again, it just feels a little bit slower than some of the others, and maybe doesn't have that something special about it. So that is GIPF, my 5th favourite game of the series. At number 4, I have Tsar. Now, I think this one could be a little bit of a controversial placement because I know this one is very highly revered. Now, I have to say that I think the bottom 3 that I've talked about already and the top 4 of the series, there's quite a gap between the level of quality between them. Maybe not quality is not the right word, but maybe how good and how fun the games are, because I think there's quite a big gap between a game like Tsar and a game like GIPF. And to be honest, these top 4, you could shift them around because they are all excellent abstract strategy games. So this one is a bit more in your face as a style of game, because you are constantly just taking your opponent's pieces off the board. So this one, of course, you have the black player and the white player. You are randomly deploying them on the board here, and you can see that each of the players have 3 different types of pieces. So you have the completely plain ones, you have the ones with a bullseye, and you also have the one with the outer ring as well. And those pieces come in 3 different levels of scarceness, really. So the blank ones, there's loads of them on the board, and the ones with the double rings, there's very few of them entirely. And the gameplay-wise, you have 2 actions you can take on your turn, the first of which has to be to take an opponent's piece. So you can simply just move along an axis and take the next piece there, as long as you're not jumping over other pieces, and so on. Any piece can take any piece. Now, the objective of the game is to try and eliminate all of one type of piece. So you can probably imagine starting the game, you're probably going to start going after the rarest of the pieces because there's fewer of them to take. But the kind of twist of the game is that there are ways you can protect those pieces by bolstering them. So I've already mentioned the first thing you have to do, which is to take an opponent's piece. The second option you can do, for your second action, you can either take another piece, you can do nothing, or you can bolster one of your pieces by placing a piece on top of another one of your own. Now, of course, they have to be next to each other, or at least trace a line there. But as you can imagine, when you are taking over another piece, that means that's another one of your pieces off the board, but that stack is going to be higher, meaning that in the future, in order to take that now higher than one piece, your opponent's piece has to be at least that size. So there is that kind of protection, but in order to protect things, you're making your other pools weaker. And what I really do love about this game, which is definitely probably the coolest feature, is that game arc, because as I mentioned, you're going to start going through those rarer pieces, and then you'll start noticing that your opponent's protecting them, and you might start going for plan B and going for the second most common ones. And then again, the strategy will change again. So although you might think, well, obviously the decision is to go for the scarcest ones, that's not always the best thing to do. And it's cool that the fact that you have to gobble up your own pieces to make the other ones stronger. So I love that kind of game arc, the constant dynamic, optimal route to take, and so on. Protecting pieces, knowing what your opponent can chain together, because as the board starts to become emptier, the potential to kind of skip over or jump across the board becomes a lot more tangible, because again, you can take 2 actions on the bounce, meaning that you can skip across the board, take a piece, and then skip from there and take another piece and catch your opponent off guard. Fantastic game. Again, this one could have taken any of the other places, really. It's that good. And I can certainly see why people would rate this one at number 1. For me, I just thought the other ones, I just prefer personally a little bit more, but I can't really criticise this one gameplay-wise. It is a brilliant piece of design. That is Tsar at number 4. At number 3, I have Link, which is the newest one of the series. This is game number 7 of the GIPF project. And this one's different in the sense that you don't actually start with your own player colour. So you can see here there's actually, I think there's 5 different colours on the board, or 6 in total with these wild pieces. And you are trying to create stacks of 5 pieces, and those stacks have to contain 1 of each colour. Of course, you can use those wild pieces to substitute a colour that's not already in that stack. Now, again, you don't start with a particular colour, but at any point in the game, you can claim an unclaimed colour as your own, meaning that that particular coloured piece has some strengths that the neutral pieces don't yet have. And all you're doing is that you are moving these pieces along the axes and gobbling up the other colours. If they are a neutral piece, then they have to kind of be the same size. But if you've claimed a colour as your own, then you can even claim bigger stacks. So you can kind of claim much stronger pieces than what you have yourself. The unique mechanism in this game is that, well, not only that you can claim the colours as you go on, but also that you can use existing colours of your own as kind of pivot points to chain moves together. So, for example, if I can see one from the setup here, I'm not sure if I can. Let's just say I was the black player, I had the black pieces. Of course, I could normally just jump here or here and take this this white piece or this blue piece. But if I was the black player, I could actually skip over that black piece with this double stack here and then claim a blue piece like so. So again, you can use those other pieces of your colour as a kind of a gateway to link your moves together. And of course, you probably want to start gobbling up your opponent's claimed pieces, because it means they're going to have fewer options to take on their turn. I do like that pivotal point in the game where you think, should I be taking a colour now? Should I leave my options open? But the longer I leave my options open, it means I'm taking weaker moves, and I could actually be lining the pockets of my opponent, because they could claim those pieces that I've put so much work into, into gobble up other pieces. So I actually do really like that, again, that game arc of the gameplay here. I think the potential to make long, cool moves in this game is definitely stronger, maybe even stronger in this game than any other game in the series. I think it has a wonderful flow. The scoring conditions can sometimes lead to a runaway leader. I mean, if you fall behind, it's quite difficult to catch back up, because you're going to get 1 point for every stack of 5 that you have. Using those wild pieces can be very powerful. So I try to always take those if I can. And all in all, I think this game has a lovely kind of upbeat feel to it. Quite breezy, but still quite tense at the same time. Very quick as well. This is probably one of the quickest games of the series from my experience, and I don't have anything bad to say about it at all. One of my favourites, more than I was expecting so actually. I think it's a fantastic design, and maybe one of the most underrated ones of the series actually, because I don't see or hear this one talked about in the same regard as the 2 yet to come, as well as the aforementioned Tsar. So yeah, this one, brilliant abstract strategy game. That is Link at number 3. At number 2, I have Yinch, which was number 6 of the GIPF project. This one, a lot of people's favourite, and I have to be honest, it really was a toss-up between this one and number 1 for that number 1 space. Depending on which way the wind blew, this one could have been number 1. This one, what an elegant design this one is. So Yinch is a game where you are trying to create runs of 5 of your colour. These little tokens here, you can see they come in white and black. Gameplay wise, it's so simple, where you have these rings on the board. What you're going to do is you're going to place one of your tokens inside that ring and then move a ring along that axis as far as you want, really. If you skip over one of these tokens, you are going to stop on the other side of it, or several, and then each token you've passed over is going to flip to the opposite side. So the whites will become blacks, the blacks will become whites. And because there are so many different pivot points here, you're not necessarily flipping them all over each time, and it's all about trying to work or use all of your pieces together to try and flip them over and even block your opponent, because you can never actually skip through the spaces where you have your rings deployed, and you can definitely use that placement to your advantage to block your opponent from taking certain moves that you don't want them to take. Now, I think this game is probably has the best catch-up mechanism that I've ever seen. So elegantly implemented, where when you do create a run of 5 pieces, one of your rings is removed from the board, and the objective of the game is to collect 3 of your rings. So as you can tell, as you are doing more 5 in a rows, then you are going to get weaker as the game goes on, because you're going to have fewer rings and therefore fewer options on the board, and your opponent has a little bit, it's quite a subtle advantage, but they can use those extra rings to try and stop you from taking those moves, or those really powerful moves. It definitely has that kind of satisfying feeling when you do skip over, 5 pieces and you flip them all to your own colour. It just feels really cool. And yeah, what a lovely, breezy, sophisticated, elegant game. Great placement. Every decision matters here. The board quickly populates, so it doesn't feel like it's dragging its heels. Constantly moving at a fast pace. And what a brilliant design. Honestly, I can certainly see why this is a lot of players' favourites. And to be honest, talking about it now, this could have easily been at number 1. So can't really talk about this one in enough esteem, really. It is a brilliantly executed abstract strategy game, and one of the best that I've played. So that is Yinch at number 2. And of course that means at number 1 I have Devon. So Devon was number 4 of the GIPF project, and it was the actual first game that I played out of the bunch. So I'm not sure if that played a big part in why it was number 1, because it's the one I'm most familiar with, but there's still no denying this is an amazing game. So Devon, you are going to be playing on this longer board here. You still have your white pieces and your black pieces, but you also have these neutral red pieces, which are a very fundamental part of the game. So this one, you are going to start deploying your pieces onto the board before you play. That's probably my biggest nitpick of the game, is that the initial setup feels a little bit tedious, and it feels like you're doing it without much rhyme or reason. Now, I'm sure if you're some kind of Rain Man, you can think that far ahead. Personally, I just seem to scatter them relatively evenly if I can. Now, gameplay-wise, you are simply choosing one of your discs that has at least one exposed edge, and you are going to be moving that piece to try and land on another piece. Now, the height of that disc is important, because that's going to show how many spaces you move. So if you have one piece, you're going to move to one of the adjacent spots. But of course, if you have, say, 3 pieces like this, then it's going to skip over and land on another piece going 3 spaces. And of course, what this means is that kind of the bigger the stacks become, the less mobile they become, and they actually become quite cumbersome, and you just can't really do much with them. Now, the scoring condition is that you want to be controlling bigger stacks, because if your piece is on the top of the stack, then every kind of piece below it, whether that's your own or an opponent's piece, will be worth a point to you. Now, I do like that, and it does mean that you are constantly trying to protect the bigger pieces, or leave yourself kind of with a single piece that you can kind of jump on top if they make a move. Lots of thinking ahead here, lots of AP, if you want to put it that way, because there are so many variables. But my favourite thing about this game, and kind of the main twist, is these red pieces. So these red pieces act as a kind of an anchor to keep pieces onto the board, because as long as you can trace a route through other pieces to a red piece, then you can stay on the board. But as soon as you become detached from a red piece, then all of those pieces that are detached will be removed from the board. And of course, you want to try and take as many of your opponent's pieces off the board as possible to restrict their moves and to give them fewer options. I love that twist. It is fascinating. And I even like the fact that you can use these red discs in a stack that you control. So you can just jump away from your opponent's pieces and just completely wipe them off the board here. Loads of strategy. Big, strong, bombastic moments in this game. I've seen several pieces be taken off the board in a certain move that I just didn't see there. So I love these shifting variables. I love the amping up of the tension as the board gets tighter and tighter. I'm trying to claim those big stacks at the last second. It's just a masterpiece, it really is. So Devon, again, very tight between this one and Yinch especially, Link just behind that. But Devon just about squeezed out a win here, and I think I've made the right decision there. So that is Devon, my favourite game of the GIPF project. Now, I just wanted to talk about my girlfriend's order as well, because I do normally play these with my girlfriend, and I thought her order was quite interesting because hers is quite a bit different than mine, actually. So her favourite of the series was still Devon. So we did agree on that respect. Her second place was Tsar, which again is a lot of players' favourites. Third place for her, interestingly, was Punkt, that kind of edge building game. So she really enjoyed that one. After that was Yinch, then Link, then GIPF, and then finally Zert. So I think the only one we actually aligned on was number 1 and number 7, the Zerts and Devon. So just an interesting take there. But hopefully you have enjoyed the video as much as I've enjoyed playing these fantastic abstract strategy games. I highly recommend checking them out, all of them out actually, if you do enjoy abstract strategy games. If you have enjoyed the video, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to my channel and check out my other content too. And for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye bye.